Princess Amelia stood at her bedroom window, watching the morning sun cast long shadows across the palace gardens. At 23, she possessed a grace that made even the most elegant courtiers pause in admiration. Her golden hair caught the light like spun silk, and her emerald eyes held a kindness that endeared her to everyone she met. Today, however, those eyes were filled with worry. The palace had been her home since birth, but lately it felt more like a prison. The source of her distress was not the gilded walls or the endless protocols, but rather the growing tension that seemed to follow her wherever she went. It all centered around two people who meant the world to her, yet could not seem to coexist peacefully. Lord Marcus Blackwood had been her closest friend since childhood. The son of a duke, he had grown up alongside her in the palace, sharing tutors, adventures, and secrets. Now a man of 25, he had become her unofficial protector and confidant. His dark hair and warm brown eyes were familiar sights in the palace corridors, and his easy laugh had brightened many of Amelia's difficult days. What others didn't know was that their friendship had blossomed into something deeper over the past year. The problem was Lady Victoria Ashford, the woman chosen to be Marcus's wife. Victoria had arrived at court 6 months ago as part of an arranged marriage agreement between their families. Beautiful in a sharp, calculating way, she possessed raven-black hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed to see everything. At 22, she was accomplished in all the arts expected of a noble lady, and she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had never been denied anything she wanted. From the moment Victoria had set foot in the palace, she had made it clear that she considered Princess Amelia a threat to her future happiness. The arrangement between the Blackwood and Ashford families was politically advantageous, bringing together two powerful houses. But Victoria had quickly realized that Marcus's heart belonged elsewhere. The tension had started subtly. Victoria would make pointed comments about the impropriety of unmarried men and women spending time alone together. She would appear whenever Marcus and Amelia were talking, inserting herself into conversations with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. She began hosting elaborate social gatherings, always ensuring that Marcus was too busy to spend his usual time with the princess. Amelia tried to be understanding. She knew that Victoria's position was difficult, arriving in a new place where everyone already had established relationships. She had even attempted to befriend the other woman, inviting her to join activities and including her in conversations. But every overture was met with polite coldness or thinly veiled hostility. The situation had escalated dramatically the previous week during the Autumn Harvest Festival. The entire court had gathered in the great ballroom, decorated with golden leaves and harvest fruits. Amelia wore a gown of deep burgundy silk that complemented her complexion beautifully, while Victoria chose an elaborate dress of midnight blue adorned with sapphires. As tradition dictated, Princess Amelia was to lead the opening dance. She had naturally turned to Marcus, as she had done for years at such events. They moved together with the easy grace of two people who had danced together since childhood, their steps perfectly synchronized. The court watched with appreciation, many commenting on what a handsome pair they made, but Victoria saw something different in their dance. She observed the way Marcus's eyes never left Amelia's face, how his hand lingered at her waist, and how Amelia's cheeks flushed pink under his gaze. When the dance ended and the couple moved apart, Victoria was there immediately. "Such a lovely performance," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the nearby courtiers. "Though I must say, it's interesting how some people seem to forget their proper places in society." The comment was delivered with a sweet smile, but its meaning was unmistakable. Several nobles exchanged glances, recognizing the challenge in Victoria's words. Amelia felt her cheeks burn, not with pleasure now, but with embarrassment and anger. Marcus stepped forward, his jaw tight. "I'm not sure what you mean, Lady Victoria." "Oh, I think you do," Victoria replied, her blue eyes flashing. Perhaps it's time certain people remembered that engagements are sacred commitments, not suggestions to be ignored when something more appealing presents itself. The ballroom had grown noticeably quieter, with conversations stopping as people strained to listen. Princess Amelia felt the weight of dozens of curious stares. She had faced many challenges in her royal life, but nothing had prepared her for this kind of public humiliation. "If you have concerns about propriety," Amelia said, keeping her voice steady despite the turmoil inside, "perhaps they would be better addressed in private." Victoria's smile widened, sensing victory. "Oh, but Your Highness, some matters affect us all. When the future of noble houses hangs in the balance, surely the court has a right to know where loyalties truly lie." The challenge was now completely in the open. Victoria was essentially accusing the princess of inappropriate behavior with her betrothed, and doing so before the entire court. It was a calculated risk, but one that Victoria felt confident in taking. She knew that Amelia's royal breeding would prevent her from creating a scene, while Marcus would be torn between defending his friend and avoiding a scandal that could damage both their reputations. Marcus looked between the two women, his face a mask of conflicted emotions. Amelia could see the struggle in his eyes, and her heart ached for him. She also realized with crystal clarity that Victoria was right about one thing. The situation had become impossible. That night, Amelia had lain awake staring at the ceiling of her bedroom, thinking about everything Victoria had said. The accusations stung because they contained elements of truth. She and Marcus had grown closer over the past year, sharing quiet conversations and stolen moments that went beyond mere friendship. She had fallen in love with him, and she believed he felt the same way about her. But Victoria was his intended bride. Their engagement had been announced with great fanfare, and breaking it would create a scandal that could damage both families politically. Marcus was trapped between duty and desire, and Amelia realized that her continued presence only made his situation more difficult. The next morning brought news that made everything worse. King William, Amelia's father, summoned her to his private study. She found him standing behind his massive oak desk, his usually kind face grave with concern. "Sit down, my dear," he said, his voice gentle but firm. Amelia took the chair across from him, her hands folded carefully in her lap. She had inherited her father's diplomatic skills, but she had never needed them more than she did now. "There have been rumors," the king began carefully. "Talk about you and young Lord Blackwood that concerns me." Amelia felt her stomach drop, but she kept her expression neutral. "What kind of talk, father?" "The kind that questions your judgment and his honor," King William replied. "Lady Victoria came to see me yesterday. She expressed concerns about the amount of time you and Marcus spend together, given his engagement to her." The betrayal hit Amelia like a physical blow. Victoria had gone directly to the king, escalating the situation beyond anything Amelia had imagined. It was a masterful political move, forcing the king to address the situation while painting herself as the wronged party seeking justice. "And what did you tell her?" Amelia asked, proud that her voice remained steady. King William sighed, suddenly looking older than his 50 years. "I told her that I would speak with you. Amelia, you know I trust your judgment, but this situation has become complicated. The Blackwood family is important to our kingdom's stability, and their alliance with the Ashfords strengthens our position considerably." Amelia understood the unspoken message. Political alliances were more important than personal feelings, even hers. It was a lesson she had learned from childhood, but it had never felt as painful as it did now. "I see," she said quietly. "Do you?" her father asked, leaning forward. "Because I need to know that you understand the implications of this situation. If these rumors continue to spread, they could damage not only your reputation, but also create tension between allied families. We cannot afford that kind of instability." Amelia nodded, feeling the weight of royal responsibility settling on her shoulders like a heavy cloak. "I understand, father. What would you have me do?" The king studied her face for a long moment. "Perhaps it would be wise for you to distance yourself from Lord Blackwood for a while, until after his wedding at least. It would allow the rumors to die down and give everyone a chance to move forward." The suggestion felt like a knife twisting in her chest, but Amelia recognized the wisdom in it. As long as she remained close to Marcus, Victoria would continue to see her as a threat. The tension would only escalate, potentially damaging relationships that were important to the kingdom. "How long?" she asked. "The wedding is planned for spring," King William said. "Perhaps until then you could find other companions, other activities to occupy your time." 6 months. The thought of avoiding Marcus for 6 months felt impossible, but Amelia knew she had little choice. Her father was being diplomatic, but she understood that this was not really a request. That afternoon, she walked through the palace gardens, trying to clear her head and decide how to proceed. The autumn air was crisp, and the leaves crunched under her feet as she followed the familiar paths she had walked countless times with Marcus. The irony was not lost on her. She was sitting by the fountain at the garden's center when she heard footsteps approaching. Without looking up, she knew it was Marcus. After so many years of friendship, she could recognize his walk anywhere. "Amelia," he said softly, taking the seat beside her on the marble bench. "I heard about your meeting with the king." She finally looked at him, seeing the pain and frustration in his brown eyes. "News travels quickly in the palace." "Victoria told me," Marcus admitted. "She seemed quite pleased with herself." They sat in silence for a moment, both understanding that their world had fundamentally changed. The easy companionship they had shared for years was now tainted by political complications and social expectations. "What are we going to do?" Marcus asked finally. Amelia had been asking herself the same question, and she thought she had found an answer, though it broke her heart to contemplate it. "I think," she said slowly, "that we need to accept that some things are more important than our personal feelings." Marcus turned to face her fully. "You can't mean that." "Can't I?" Amelia stood up, pacing a few steps away from the bench. "Look at what's happening, Marcus. Victoria is turning the court against us. My father is questioning my judgment, and your engagement is becoming a source of scandal. Is this really what we want?" "What I want," Marcus said, standing and moving toward her, "is to be with you. I've never made any secret of that." "But you can't," Amelia said, the words coming out more harshly than she intended. "You're engaged to Victoria. Your families have announced the marriage. Breaking that engagement would damage both your houses politically, and you know it." Marcus ran his hands through his dark hair, a gesture she had seen him make countless times when he was frustrated. "There has to be another way." "What way?" Amelia challenged. "Victoria has made it clear that she won't tolerate our friendship. My father has essentially ordered me to stay away from you. The entire court is watching us, waiting for the next scandal. Tell me, what other way is there?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, and Amelia could see him struggling with the same realization that had been growing in her mind. There was no easy solution, no way to satisfy everyone's expectations while following their hearts. "So what are you saying?" he asked finally. Amelia took a deep breath, steeling herself for what she had to do. "I'm saying that maybe it would be better if I weren't here to complicate things." "Amelia, no." "Listen to me," she continued, her voice gaining strength. "As long as I'm here, Victoria will see me as a threat. The court will continue to speculate about us. You'll be torn between duty and whatever this is between us. But if I were somewhere else, if I weren't part of the daily life of the palace, then maybe everyone could move forward." Marcus stared at her, understanding dawning in his eyes. "You're talking about leaving." "I'm talking about doing what's best for everyone," Amelia corrected. "Including us." "How can leaving possibly be what's best for us?" Marcus demanded. Amelia felt tears threatening, but she blinked them back. She had to be strong now, for both of them. "Because as long as we're both here, we'll never be able to move on. We'll keep hoping for something that can't happen, and that hope will destroy us both." The truth of her words hung between them like a tangible thing. They both knew that their love was real, but they also knew that love alone was not enough to overcome the political and social realities of their world. "Where would you go?" Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know yet," Amelia admitted. "Perhaps to visit my aunt in the countryside, or maybe to the convent of St. Catherine. I've always been interested in their charitable work." The mention of the convent made Marcus flinch. It was a place where noble ladies sometimes went to retreat from the world, and the implication was clear. Amelia was considering removing herself from court life entirely, possibly permanently. "You can't be serious about the convent," Marcus said. "I'm serious about finding a solution that doesn't destroy everyone I care about," Amelia replied. "If that means leaving court life behind, then that's what I'll do." They stood facing each other in the garden, both understanding that this conversation was changing everything between them. The future they had quietly dreamed about was slipping away, replaced by a reality neither of them wanted but both felt powerless to change. "When?" Marcus asked. "Soon," Amelia said. "Before the winter social season begins. Before Victoria can create any more scenes or spread any more rumors." Marcus stepped closer to her, and for a moment Amelia thought he might take her in his arms. Instead, he reached out and gently touched her cheek with his fingertips. "I love you," he said simply. "That won't change, no matter where you go or what happens." Amelia closed her eyes, leaning into his touch for just a moment before stepping back. "And I love you, which is why I have to do this." As she walked away from him, heading back toward the palace, Amelia felt like she was leaving part of her soul behind in the garden. But she also felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time in months, she had a plan, a way forward that might bring peace to everyone involved. She didn't see Victoria watching from an upper window of the palace, a satisfied smile playing across her lips. The future Lady Blackwood had achieved exactly what she had hoped for, the removal of her rival without having to appear directly responsible for it. Sometimes, Victoria reflected, the best victories were the ones where your enemies defeated themselves. 3 weeks had passed since Amelia's conversation with Marcus in the garden, and the palace buzzed with speculation about the princess's sudden change in behavior. She had indeed distanced herself from Lord Blackwood, declining invitations to events where he would be present and finding excuses to avoid their usual meeting places. To the court, it appeared that she had finally recognized the impropriety of her friendship with an engaged man. Victoria Ashford felt triumphant. Her strategy had worked perfectly. She had maneuvered the situation so that Princess Amelia had essentially removed herself as competition. Now Victoria could focus on securing her position as Marcus's wife without the constant worry of his childhood friend interfering. But victory, Victoria was discovering, tasted more bitter than sweet. The problem was Marcus himself. Since Amelia's withdrawal, he had become distant and cold. He fulfilled his obligations to Victoria with mechanical precision, escorting her to social events, dancing the required dances, engaging in polite conversation. But there was no warmth in any of it. He treated her with the same courteous indifference he might show to any other noble lady at court. Victoria had expected that removing Amelia from the equation would naturally lead Marcus to transfer his affections to her. After all, she was beautiful, accomplished, and about to become his wife. What more could he want? But as the days passed, it became clear that Marcus's heart was not so easily redirected. The breaking point came during a dinner party Victoria had organized to celebrate their upcoming engagement announcement. She had spared no expense, hiring the best musicians, commissioning elaborate decorations, and ensuring that all the most influential members of the court would attend. It was meant to be a triumphant display of her future position as Lady Blackwood. The evening started well enough. The great dining hall glittered with candlelight, and Victoria wore a stunning gown of emerald silk that complemented her dark beauty perfectly. She had positioned herself at Marcus's side throughout the evening, playing the role of the devoted bride-to-be with practiced skill. But as the night progressed, Victoria became increasingly aware that something was wrong. Marcus participated in conversations but contributed little. He smiled when appropriate but never laughed. Most telling of all, his eyes constantly wandered around the room as if searching for someone who wasn't there. The moment that shattered Victoria's composure came during the dancing, as she and Marcus moved through a stately waltz. She noticed his attention drift to a young woman with golden hair standing near the musicians. For a moment, Victoria thought it was Princess Amelia, and her heart clenched with fury. But as they turned, she realized it was merely Lady Catherine Pemberton, whose hair color was similar to the princess's. The fact that Marcus had mistaken another woman for Amelia was devastating enough. But what made it worse was what happened next. When Marcus realized his error, his face fell with such obvious disappointment that several nearby couples noticed. Lady Catherine herself seemed confused by the intensity of his stare, and whispers began to ripple through the dancing couples. Victoria felt her carefully constructed evening beginning to crumble. She tightened her grip on Marcus's arm, trying to recapture his attention. But he seemed lost in his own thoughts. "Marcus," she whispered as they continued to dance, "people are staring." He blinked and focused on her as if seeing her for the first time that evening. "I apologize. I was distracted." "By what?" Victoria asked, though she already knew the answer. Marcus didn't reply, but his silence was answer enough. Victoria felt something cold and hard settle in her chest. She had won the battle for Marcus's hand in marriage, but she was losing the war for his heart. After the dance, Victoria excused herself and retreated to the ladies' retiring room, needing a moment to compose herself. She stood before the mirror, adjusting her hair and checking her appearance, trying to understand how everything was going so wrong. "Lady Victoria?" She turned to find Lady Margaret Thornfield, an older woman known for her sharp tongue and sharper observations. Lady Margaret had been watching the evening's events with the keen interest of someone who thrived on court gossip. "Yes," Victoria replied, forcing a smile. "Forgive me for speaking plainly, my dear, but you might want to consider that some prizes are not worth winning if they come unwillingly." The words hit Victoria like a slap. "I'm not sure what you mean." Lady Margaret moved closer, lowering her voice. "Lord Blackwood is a good man, but anyone with eyes can see that his heart belongs elsewhere. You can force him to marry you, but you cannot force him to love you. And a loveless marriage, even among the nobility, is its own kind of prison. Our marriage is an arrangement between our families," Victoria said stiffly. "Love is not a requirement." "Perhaps not," Lady Margaret agreed. "But happiness is, if you want a truly successful union. And from what I observed tonight, neither you nor Lord Blackwood seems particularly happy with the current arrangement." After Lady Margaret left, Victoria stared at her reflection again, seeing not the triumphant bride-to-be she had imagined, but a woman whose victory was hollow. She had achieved everything she thought she wanted, but it was bringing her no joy. The realization that followed was even more disturbing. She was beginning to hate Marcus almost as much as she had hated Princess Amelia. His obvious pining for another woman was a constant reminder that she was his second choice, or perhaps not even that. She had become nothing more than a duty to him, a political obligation to be endured. Meanwhile, Princess Amelia was struggling with her own demons. The decision to distance herself from Marcus had been the right one politically, but it was destroying her emotionally. She spent her days going through the motions of royal life, attending meetings, reviewing correspondence, participating in charitable activities, but she felt like she was living in a fog. Her father had noticed the change in her demeanor and had begun discussing plans for her future that made her stomach churn. There was talk of potential marriages to foreign princes, of diplomatic missions that would take her away from the kingdom for extended periods. King William clearly believed that finding her a husband and a new life elsewhere would solve the current problems, but Amelia wasn't sure she wanted to be solved in that way. The thought of marrying a stranger, of leaving everything she had ever known, filled her with dread. Yet staying seemed equally impossible, especially as plans for Marcus and Victoria's wedding continued to move forward. The breaking point came one evening when Amelia was walking through the palace corridors, returning to her chambers after a particularly tedious diplomatic dinner. She heard voices coming from the library and paused when she recognized Victoria's sharp tone. "I don't understand why you continue to torture both of us this way," Victoria was saying. "The engagement is announced, the wedding is planned, and yet you act as though you're being led to an execution." "Perhaps because that's how it feels," came Marcus's weary reply. Amelia knew she should walk away, that listening to this conversation was both inappropriate and painful. But she found herself frozen in place. "How it feels?" Victoria's voice rose slightly. "I am offering you marriage to one of the most sought-after women at court, an alliance that will benefit both our families enormously, and you speak of it as though it were a death sentence?" "I never asked for any of this," Marcus said. "The engagement, the political alliance, the whole elaborate charade. I went along with it because I had to, because refusing would have damaged my family's reputation and standing. But don't ask me to pretend enthusiasm for a marriage I never wanted." There was a long pause, and when Victoria spoke again, her voice was dangerously quiet. "And what is it you do want, Marcus? Because we both know the answer to that question, don't we?" "Leave her out of this," Marcus warned. "Leave her out of this?" Victoria laughed. But there was no humor in the sound. "She's the reason for all of this. Every time you look at me, you're thinking of her. Every conversation we have, you're wishing you were talking to her instead. Do you think I'm blind? Do you think I don't see the way you scan every room, hoping she'll walk in?" Amelia pressed herself against the wall, feeling tears start to slide down her cheeks. She had thought that removing herself from the equation would solve everyone's problems, but clearly, she had only made things worse. "My feelings are my own concern," Marcus said. "Not when they affect our marriage," Victoria snapped. "Not when they make me look like a fool in front of the entire court. Do you have any idea how humiliating it is to be engaged to a man who is obviously in love with someone else?" "Then break the engagement," Marcus said suddenly. "If this arrangement makes you so miserable, if you find my company so unbearable, then end it. I won't stop you." The silence that followed was deafening. Amelia could imagine Victoria's shock at the suggestion. Breaking an engagement was scandalous enough, but for a woman to be the one to end it was almost unthinkable in their society. "You know I can't do that," Victoria said finally. "My family's honor is tied to this marriage. If I break the engagement, especially after the announcement has been made, I'll be ruined socially. No other respectable family would consider an alliance with us." "Then we're both trapped," Marcus said quietly. "You can't break the engagement, and I can't learn to love someone I don't. So we'll go through with the wedding, and we'll both spend the rest of our lives pretending to be something we're not." Victoria's response was barely audible, but Amelia caught every word. Unless, of course, Princess Amelia were to leave the kingdom entirely, then perhaps you might finally accept reality and try to make our marriage work. What are you talking about? Marcus asked sharply. Oh, come now, Victoria said. Surely you've heard the rumors. The king is considering several options for the princess's future. Marriage to the Prince of Aldoria, for instance, or perhaps a diplomatic mission to the Eastern Kingdoms that could last for years. There's even talk of her taking vows at the convent of St. Catherine. Amelia felt the blood drain from her face. She had mentioned the convent to Marcus as a possibility, but she hadn't realized that the idea had spread beyond their private conversation. Who told you this? Marcus demanded. I have my sources, Victoria replied smugly. The point is that Princess Amelia's time at this court is coming to an end one way or another. And when she's gone, really gone, then perhaps you can stop living in a fantasy and start building a real life with me. And if I can't? Marcus asked. What if removing her from my sight doesn't change how I feel? Victoria was quiet for so long that Amelia began to think the conversation was over. When she finally spoke, her words were cold and calculating. Then I suppose we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But I have to believe that out of sight will eventually mean out of mind. After all, what is love but habit? And habits can be broken. Amelia couldn't bear to listen anymore. She crept away from the library, her heart pounding with a mixture of grief and fury. Victoria was actively working to engineer her removal from the kingdom. And worse, she seemed confident that it would work. But what disturbed Amelia most was the realization that Victoria might be right. Perhaps distance would eventually dim Marcus's feelings for her. Perhaps time and separation would allow him to find happiness with his intended bride, and perhaps that would be the best outcome for everyone involved. The next morning, Amelia requested a private audience with her father. She found King William in his study, reviewing trade agreements with neighboring kingdoms. When she entered, he looked up with the warm smile that had comforted her throughout her childhood. Amelia, my dear, you look troubled. I am troubled, father, she said, taking the chair across from his desk. I've been thinking about our conversation a few weeks ago, about the need for me to distance myself from certain complications. King William set down his papers and gave her his full attention. Yes? I think the time has come for me to consider more permanent solutions, Amelia said, proud that her voice remained steady. You mentioned several possibilities for my future. I'd like to discuss them seriously. The king studied her face carefully. Are you certain? Some of those options would mean leaving the kingdom for an extended period, possibly permanently. I understand that, Amelia replied, but I think it might be for the best. My continued presence here seems to be causing difficulties. Perhaps it would be better for everyone if I found a new purpose elsewhere. King William leaned back in his chair, looking suddenly older. I had hoped it wouldn't come to this. You're my only daughter, Amelia, the thought of you so far away. But it would solve the current problems, Amelia said gently. And isn't that worth considering? The king was quiet for a long moment, weighing political necessity against paternal love. Finally, he sighed. There is indeed an opportunity that has presented itself. Prince Edmund of Aldoria has expressed interest in a marriage alliance. He's a good man, by all accounts, and the political benefits would be substantial. How substantial? Amelia asked, though her heart sank at the thought of marrying a stranger. Aldoria controls several important trade routes, King William explained. An alliance with them would strengthen our economy considerably and provide security against potential threats from the northern kingdoms. Amelia understood. Her marriage would not just be a personal matter, but a tool of statecraft. It was the reality of royal life, something she had always known, but never had to face directly. What is Prince Edmund like? She asked. Intelligent, well-educated, reportedly kind to his subjects, the king said. He's 28 years old and has never been married. His letters suggest he's genuinely interested in finding a partner rather than simply acquiring a political asset. It sounded reasonable, even pleasant. But it didn't sound like love, and after knowing what real love felt like with Marcus, Amelia wondered if she could ever be satisfied with anything less. "There's another option," King William continued, "less permanent perhaps, but equally effective in resolving current difficulties. The Queen of Valdaria has requested a cultural ambassador to help establish educational programs in her kingdom. It would be a position of genuine importance, lasting 2 to 3 years initially, with the possibility of extension." This option appealed to Amelia more than marriage to a stranger. She had always been interested in education and social reform, and the chance to make a real difference in another kingdom was tempting. "And the third option?" she asked, though she already knew. "The convent of St. Catherine," King William said quietly. "Though I must say, that idea troubles me greatly. You weren't meant for a religious life, Amelia. You have too much to offer the world." "Perhaps," Amelia said. "But it would be a way to contribute meaningfully while removing myself from situations that cause conflict." They discussed the options at length, with King William providing details about each possibility. The conversation was practical and measured, focused on political implications and practical considerations. Neither of them mentioned the real reason for these discussions, that the kingdom's only princess was being effectively exiled because her love for the wrong man had become politically inconvenient. As Amelia left her father's study, she felt both relief and despair. She had taken control of her situation, choosing to shape her own future rather than waiting for others to decide it for her. But she was also saying goodbye to the life she had always known, to the dreams she had harbored, and to the man she loved. That evening, she stood once again at her bedroom window, looking out at the gardens where she had spent so many happy hours. Tomorrow, she would begin making arrangements for her departure. Within a month, she would be gone from the palace forever. She didn't see Marcus standing in the shadows below, looking up at her window with the same desperate longing that filled her own heart. Nor did she see Victoria watching both of them from her own window, calculating how to ensure that when the princess finally left, there would be no possibility of her return. The endgame was approaching, and Victoria intended to win decisively. 2 weeks before Princess Amelia's scheduled departure to Valdaria, the palace received unexpected news that would change everything. A messenger arrived at dawn, bearing urgent correspondence from the King of Aldoria. Prince Edmund, who had been negotiating a marriage alliance with Princess Amelia, had been killed in a hunting accident. The news sent shockwaves through the court, not just because of the tragedy itself, but because of its political implications. The marriage alliance with Aldoria was now impossible, and the alternative arrangement with Valdaria suddenly became the only viable option for resolving the princess's situation. Victoria received the news with mixed feelings. On one hand, it meant that Princess Amelia would still be leaving, which was what she wanted. On the other hand, the Valdaria appointment was temporary, lasting only 2 to 3 years. There would always be the possibility of the princess's return, which left Victoria's victory incomplete. But what troubled Victoria most was Marcus's reaction to the news. When he learned that Prince Edmund had died and the marriage alliance was cancelled, she saw something she hadn't expected in his eyes. Relief. Despite his protestations of duty and honor, the thought of Amelia marrying another man had been torture for him. This realization crystallized something dark in Victoria's mind. She understood now that simply removing Amelia from the kingdom wouldn't be enough. As long as there was hope of the princess's return, Marcus would never fully commit to their marriage. Victoria needed to find a way to make Amelia's departure permanent and absolute. The opportunity presented itself sooner than Victoria had dared hope. While reviewing correspondence in her private chambers, she discovered something that made her pulse quicken with possibility. hidden among routine letters, was a communication from Lord Edmund Ashford, her father's younger brother, who served as a diplomatic attaché in the distant kingdom of Thessara. The letter mentioned rumors circulating in Thessara about Princess Amelia's supposed indiscretions with an engaged nobleman. The story, according to Lord Edmund, had been spread by traveling merchants and was being discussed in several foreign courts as an example of the declining moral standards in their kingdom. Victoria read the letter 3 times, understanding immediately how she could use this information. The rumors, whether true or exaggerated, provided her with a weapon more powerful than anything she had wielded before. She began her campaign carefully, starting with Lady Margaret Thornfield, the same woman who had warned her about the dangers of forcing an unwilling marriage. Victoria approached Lady Margaret with a show of concern and distress. "I'm so troubled by something I've learned," Victoria confided during a private tea. "I hardly know what to do with the information." Lady Margaret, ever eager for palace gossip, leaned forward with interest. "What is it, my dear?" Victoria pulled out her uncle's letter, pointing to the relevant passage. "My uncle writes from Thessara about rumors concerning Princess Amelia. Apparently stories about her friendship with Marcus have spread to foreign courts. They're saying terrible things about her character and, by extension, about the moral standards of our entire kingdom." Lady Margaret read the passage, her eyebrows rising with each word. "This is most disturbing. How widespread are these rumors?" "According to my uncle, they've reached at least 3 foreign courts," Victoria said, allowing genuine worry to color her voice. "He's concerned about the damage to our kingdom's reputation, especially given the delicate trade negotiations currently underway." This was brilliant strategy on Victoria's part. By framing the issue in terms of national reputation rather than personal jealousy, she made herself appear patriotic and concerned rather than vindictive. Lady Margaret, as one of the most influential gossips at court, would ensure that this information reached the right ears quickly. "What do you think should be done?" Lady Margaret asked. Victoria appeared to consider the question carefully. "I suppose the damage is already done, but perhaps it would be wise to ensure that Princess Amelia's departure to Valderia is handled in a way that demonstrates the king's commitment to propriety. A very public, very final farewell that makes clear she won't be returning anytime soon." Within days, Victoria's carefully planted information had spread throughout the court. The story grew with each telling, as court gossip always did, until it seemed that half the civilized world was talking about Princess Amelia's scandalous behavior. Several noble families began expressing concerns about their kingdom's international reputation. King William was approached by a delegation of his most trusted advisors, all expressing worry about the rumors circulating in foreign courts. They suggested that perhaps Princess Amelia's departure should be handled more formally, as a demonstration of the kingdom's commitment to moral standards. The king found himself in an impossible situation. He knew his daughter was innocent of any real wrongdoing, but he also couldn't ignore the potential political damage. After much deliberation, he made a decision that broke his heart, but seemed politically necessary. He summoned Amelia to a private meeting, this time in the formal throne room rather than his study. The change in venue told Amelia everything she needed to know about the seriousness of the situation. "My dear daughter," King William began, his voice heavy with regret, "I'm afraid circumstances have forced my hand in ways I never anticipated." Amelia stood before the throne, maintaining the composed dignity that had been trained into her since childhood. "What circumstances, father?" The king explained about the rumors circulating in foreign courts, about the concerns raised by his advisors, and about the need to demonstrate the kingdom's commitment to propriety. With each word, Amelia felt the walls of her world closing in around her. "I see," she said when he finished. "And what does this mean for my departure to Valderia?" It means that your mission there has been extended indefinitely, King William said. It also means that your departure will be formal and public, attended by foreign dignitaries and recorded in official chronicles. It will send a clear message about our kingdom's values. Amelia understood the implications immediately. This wouldn't be a temporary assignment from which she could return when circumstances improved. This was exile, dressed up in diplomatic language, but exile nonetheless. "How long is indefinitely?" she asked. King William couldn't meet her eyes. "At least 5 years, possibly longer depending on political circumstances and the success of your mission." 5 years. By the time she returned, if she ever returned, Marcus would be long married to Victoria. Any hope of a different future would be dead and buried. "I understand," Amelia said, proud that her voice didn't waver. "Do you?" King William asked, finally looking at her directly. "Because I need you to know that this isn't what I wanted. If there were any other way—" "But there isn't," Amelia finished. "The good of the kingdom comes before personal desires. You taught me that lesson yourself, Father." The formal departure ceremony was scheduled for the following week. Amelia threw herself into preparations, using activity to avoid thinking about what she was leaving behind. She met with officials from Valderia to discuss her mission, reviewed educational curricula, and packed her belongings with mechanical efficiency. It was during one of these preparation sessions that she finally encountered Marcus alone. She was leaving the palace library, her arms full of books about Valderian culture, when she almost collided with him in the corridor. "Amelia," he said, reaching out to steady the books before they fell. "I've been trying to find an opportunity to speak with you privately." She looked at him, noting the lines of strain around his eyes and the pallor of his complexion. The past few weeks had been as difficult for him as they had been for her. "I'm not sure that's wise," she said, "given recent complications." "The rumors," Marcus said bitterly. "Yes, I've heard them all. Amazing how quickly stories spread and grow in the telling." They stood in the empty corridor, both aware that even this brief encounter could be misinterpreted by anyone who saw them. "Marcus," Amelia began, but he interrupted her. "I know what you're going to say, that this is for the best, that my duty is to Victoria, that you're doing this to protect everyone. But I need you to know that none of this is right. These rumors, this exile disguised as a diplomatic mission, the way everyone is pretending this is normal, none of it is right." "But it's reality," Amelia said softly. "And we have to live in reality, not in dreams of what might have been." Marcus moved closer, lowering his voice. "What if we didn't? What if we refused to accept this?" "There are other kingdoms, other possibilities. We could leave together, start fresh somewhere else." For a moment, Amelia allowed herself to imagine it. Running away with Marcus, finding some distant court where their love could flourish without political complications. It was a beautiful dream. "And abandon our families? Our duties? Our honor?" she asked. "What kind of life would we build on that foundation?" "A life where we're together," Marcus said desperately. "A life where we're both exiles and outcasts," Amelia corrected. "A life where we've hurt everyone who loved us and trusted us. Could you really be happy knowing that our joy came at such a cost?" Marcus was silent for a long moment, and Amelia could see him struggling with the same moral conflicts that had tormented her for months. "No," he admitted finally, "I couldn't." "But that doesn't make this any easier to bear." "I know," Amelia said, reaching out to touch his arm briefly before pulling her hand back. "But ease was never promised to us. We were born to duty, Marcus. Sometimes that duty requires sacrifice." They parted without saying goodbye, both understanding that this was likely their last private conversation. Amelia returned to her chambers with a heavy heart, while Marcus went to find Victoria and inform her that he was ready to discuss their wedding plans seriously. Victoria received this news with triumph, tempered by suspicion. She had gotten what she wanted, but something in Marcus's manner suggested that victory had come at a higher cost than she had anticipated. The departure ceremony took place on a crisp autumn morning. The palace courtyard was filled with dignitaries, nobles, and foreign ambassadors, all gathered to witness Princess Amelia's departure for Valderia. The king had spared no expense in making the event impressive, understanding that it would be discussed in courts across the continent. Amelia wore a traveling dress of deep blue silk, her golden hair arranged in an elaborate style that emphasized her royal bearing. She moved through the ceremony with practiced grace, accepting wishes for a successful mission and exchanging diplomatic pleasantries with foreign representatives. Victoria stood with the other court ladies, watching every moment with satisfaction. Princess Amelia looked beautiful and dignified, but she also looked like someone saying goodbye forever. Victoria had succeeded beyond her wildest hopes. Marcus stood with the other nobles, his face a mask of proper formality. Only someone who knew him well could see the pain in his eyes as he watched the woman he loved prepare to leave his life forever. The moment that nearly broke both their resolves came when Princess Amelia made her formal farewell to the court. Standing before the assembled crowd, she delivered a speech about her honor in serving the kingdom and her commitment to the mission ahead. Her words were perfectly crafted and flawlessly delivered. But when her eyes met Marcus's across the courtyard just for an instant, the carefully maintained composure almost cracked. In that brief moment, all their love, regret, and loss was visible to anyone watching closely. Victoria saw it and felt a moment of doubt. Had she won a hollow victory? Would Marcus spend their entire marriage mourning what he had lost? King William saw it and felt his heart break for his daughter's sacrifice. Lady Margaret saw it and began to understand the true cost of court politics. But the moment passed, and Princess Amelia climbed into her carriage with dignity intact. As the horses began to move and the palace gates opened to receive her departure procession, she did not look back. Marcus watched the carriage disappear down the road, feeling like part of his soul was departing with it. Beside him, Victoria slipped her arm through his, claiming her victory and her future husband with a gesture that looked affectionate to observers, but felt possessive to Marcus. "Now we can truly begin our life together," Victoria murmured, loud enough for nearby courtiers to hear. Marcus nodded because it was expected, but he said nothing. How could he explain that his life felt like it was ending rather than beginning? In the carriage, Princess Amelia watched familiar landmarks disappear behind her, each one a small goodbye to the world she had known. She thought about Marcus, probably standing with Victoria right now, beginning the process of building a marriage without love. She thought about her father, carrying the weight of a decision that had sacrificed his daughter's happiness for political necessity. But mostly she thought about the future. Valderia offered opportunities to make a real difference in people's lives through educational reform and social programs. It was meaningful work that could bring purpose to her exile. Perhaps in time, she could find peace, if not happiness, in her new role. The carriage rolled on through the autumn countryside, carrying Princess Amelia toward an uncertain but determined future. Behind her, Victoria Ashford had finally achieved everything she thought she wanted, only to discover that some victories leave the victor empty. And in the palace, King William sat alone in his study, staring at a portrait of his daughter and wondering if the price of political stability was always measured in personal heartbreak. The royal household had been forever changed by jealousy, politics, and impossible choices. Love had been sacrificed on the altar of duty, and everyone involved would spend years learning to live with the consequences of decisions made in desperation and fear. Princess Amelia's goodbye had indeed been heartbreaking, But perhaps more heartbreaking still was the realization that sometimes even the right choices leave everyone poorer for having made them.